This is the Bama Podcast with Marty Solomon. I'm his co-host, Brent Billings. Today we are joined by Elle Grover Fricks to survey the forgotten women of the New Testament. Welcome back.
Thank you. I'm so excited. We've been focusing on Tanakh for quite some time. So now we get to turn our eyes into the future, or the past for us, but you know, whatever.
The less distant past.
That's right.
The middle future.
Yeah, something. So we're going to survey a couple of different ladies who maybe they're not completely unknown. Like in our second episode, there's certainly folks in there who have been translated out of the text. Most of the people who we're talking about today, you'll know, you'll recognize them, like, oh yeah, her. But still good stuff. Okay, so we're going to start with prophets. So Marty, you just wrote a wonderful book available wherever books are sold, now available for purchase. And one of those chapters is on prophets. So how would you define a prophet?
Well, I remember back in the day, back in the session 2 days, and I said this in my book as well, but I fought with it. I called them, a prophet was a mouthpiece. I called them the mouthpiece of the Lord. And the whole time I did in the book, I had Abraham Joshua Heschel ringing in my back of my mind, where he was like, that's not what they are. They're more than that. That's not it. That's not it. And I was like, how do I say this? And so I tried to add maybe a little bit more poetry to my explanation in the book. But I think that's my typical go-to. They are here to convey, but see, now I can't talk about it without Heschel language. Like, they're here to convey the pathos of God.
Yeah, I think you also refer to them as guerrilla speakers.
Oh,
right?
Yeah, absolutely. Like guerrilla preachers, like, what was the phrase guerrilla theater? Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yep.
Well, very exciting. Just as there were female prophets in Tanakh, we continue to see female prophets show up in the New Testament. So they're scattered all over the place, if we have the eyes to see and the ears to hear. So in Corinthians, of course, famously, Paul tells women who are prophesying in the ecclesia and the church to make sure their heads are covered, which would imply that they're doing so, right?
It would seem that way.
Seem like it. It would be odd if not.
I mean, maybe it's one of those like super old laws that's still on the books where it's like giraffes are illegal in Illinois.
That would be the way we kind of interpret it today, huh? But
it is, yeah.
Oh, well. Acts 21 tells us Philip's 4 daughters were prophets. Ding, ding, ding. Marty has a great teaching on that in Turkey. Is it Turkey?
I do. And if we link the right church traditions with it, he may have even had 3 more by the time it was done. Potentially 7 daughters who prophesied. Absolutely.
Right. In Acts, there's only 4, but it's 4. 7's better than 4, unless you have to buy a minivan.
Absolutely.
Okay. There's also some scholarly conversation about the woman who anoints Jesus. So she appears in all 4 Gospels, but in Matthew and Mark, she's specifically anointing Jesus's head. And the conversation in the text, Jesus defends her by saying that she's preparing him for burial, right? That's the usual byline. But if we look at it from the perspective of honor culture and the fact that she was certainly being presumptuous, when we think about gender roles, and the fact that the disciples might have been more worried about that than the price of the anointing oil, the perfume, that could be an honorable way not to say what would have been so explicit to them that she shouldn't have been doing that. And if, of course, we think about people anointing other people, what stories pop out from the Tanakh?
I think of Samuel anointing David as the very first thing that comes to mind.
Right.
Oh, prophet. Yeah, sure. A prophet. Yeah, the prophets are the ones that I see where you're headed. Yeah.
And Jesus, of course, being the line of David, son of David, big theological point. And so he invites, potentially through allowing her to do so, he invites a woman to stand in the role of Shmuel. In this moment where he's showing a different kind of kingship, of course, than Shaul and David. whacked out, but still important.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got these little moments in the New Testament about female prophets, but one of them stands out. We probably read her every year because she's part of the incarnation story and the birth story, which is the prophetess Anna or Hannah. She's in Luke 2, verse 36 through 38. Brent, would you mind reading that for us? Maybe in the NKJV or something? Sorry, I didn't pre-warn you.
New King James.
Is this even allowed? What's going on right now?
No.
Elle just shows up and she thinks she can just change the officially blessed Bema translation.
What is the officially blessed one?
Obviously, the NIV.
Oh.
But
It's not, I wouldn't say it's official, but it's certainly what we exclusively use just about.
I was more being facetious and tongue-in-cheek, but you get the idea.
Yeah, somebody actually asked me the other day. They said I was reading the NET. I actually don't really read from the NET. I just use it for the footnotes. But I have it in parallel with the NIV, so I'm usually reading the NIV. But I can read New King James if that's what you're really into.
This might be the first time. We've had one where we quoted multiple translations, and I bet we probably grabbed NKJV for that. But
We're
might
gonna take a little dive into translations in probably 20 minutes. So hold your horses.
Hooray!
Yeah.
I just got excited.
So many horses to hold. Okay, Luke.
Okay.
Brent via Luke. Or Luke via Brent. One of the two.
Now there was one, Anna, a prophetess, the daughter of Phanuel of the tribe of Asher. She was of a great age and had lived with a husband 7 years from her virginity. And this woman was a widow of about 84 years who did not depart from the temple, but served God with fastings and prayers night and day. And coming in that instant, she gave thanks to the Lord and spoke of him to all those who looked for redemption in Jerusalem.
Wonderful. Okay, so what stands out? What's odd? What catches your eye in that passage?
Well, I mean, a lot of the language, because we don't normally read the New King James.
Okay. Well, with those freshened eyes.
Yeah, I mean, the virginity part, I feel like, is probably... Yeah, the NIV just says after her marriage, so that could potentially give some kind of flavor to it, that maybe some sort of textual link that I wouldn't necessarily catch otherwise.
I would suggest, this is not the main point at all, but I would suggest that that's linked to the Parthenos, as in the Parthenon, because where does she live?
In the temple, right?
In the temple.
Oh, yeah, I've noticed that before. Yeah, that's a great point. Yep. Okay.
Yeah, the 84 years part caught me.
Yeah.
Which is a long time, but also, yeah, she was a widow of about 84 years. NIV says she was a widow until she was 84.
Yeah. So there's a discrepancy in different translations, which is why I went with New King James, about whether she was 84 years old or whether she was 84 years old plus the age at which she was married, putting her at like 105. I fall on one side, which is why I had you read a maybe unexpected one.
Okay.
But anything else?
Well, prayers night and day, I think, is an interesting order.
Unless you're thinking from a Jewish perspective, and then it's makes sense.
Well, sure. Yeah. But like it stands out as linking it to,
Genesis.
Yeah.
Right. So you guys mentioned the 84 years, whether that's as long as she lived or it was 84 years since her husband died. What perhaps might stand out culturally about that is, what does Paul tell widows to do? Or what do the pastoral epistles tell widows to do?
It tells them to read. Whoa, you're really stretching my memory of these passages. Does it tell them to remarry if they're able?
It does. It does tell them to remarry if they're able. So that was very advantageous to do, especially if you've only been married to your spouse for 7 years, depending on when your theory on average age range is. You're still very marriageable. And so we see different examples, like in the book of Judges, when women are leaving their husbands or something happens, they're supposed to go back to the house of their father, and then they get remarried to somebody. That helps protect them economically, right? It helps maximize how many children they might have. It puts them in a new place that they can have a new community. And Paul points out that then the church isn't taking care of them. The house of whoever they married into is. And so what pops out, maybe for someone who's used to that way of life, is she was widowed so young, and yet she never remarried. And I know this is going to be even more of a stretch, but do you recall any widows who remained widows rather than getting remarried? And it's a bit of a trick question. So don't burst too many brain cells on thinking about it.
In Tanakh?
Well, isn't that the thing? From 135 BCE.
Oh.
So no, not in Tanakh. Is the thing there. Oh. And yet very popular in the first century.
Oh. I feel like I should know this one, and I don't.
You probably do. It's just probably the heat of the trivia.
I do know what it's like to be Brent now, all these episodes. Or getting grilled with questions.
There you go. We need more Brent appreciation.
Yep.
Okay, so another woman who was very popular at that time that they would very likely think of is the woman Yehudit. The book of Judith was, again, written about 100 to 200 years before the birth of Christ. And it's a story of a widow who does not remarry. She also has other little connections with Hannah, she's from the tribe of Simeon. And Anna here is put next to this passage about a guy named Simeon, right? They both are older. They're both not remarrying. And so I'd like to take a moment to tell her story, since most people probably aren't super familiar, and then see what we can see about what Luke might be saying about Hannah.
Judith's story.
Yes.
All right. Love it.
Okay. So the Book of Judith, part of the Catholic canon, kept out of the Protestant canon, not, by the way, because of some conspiracy about female characters, but rather because Luther pointed out that the first 7 chapters are historical and the history is pretty anachronistic. And so he said it was a good and holy book that people should read, and even said that the Spirit was speaking in it, and yet he kept it from the canon because of historicity. But so in the story, Assyria is encroaching, and King Uzziah has decided that he is just going to let go this town, which has one of the words for virginity, Bethulia, as the name. So again, we've got a little ding, ding, ding link over to Hannah. He's just going to surrender this town to the Assyrians. Yehudit, Judith, our main character, finds out and takes absolutely everybody to task for it. She goes and she prays first, but she goes and talks to her town leaders. She goes and talks to the king. She says, I have a plan and I'm going to deal with this. This is not appropriate. Our God champions the orphans, the helpless, those in need. Why are we assuming that God will not show up for us? And so she, despite having been a widow for a long time of much means, she wasn't living that way. She was living in austerity despite having lots of means. But she puts on her old garments and takes her maid with her and dressed in all this finery. And she extraordinarily walks out into the valley outside of her town and lets herself get taken captive by the Assyrians, which is extraordinarily brave if you're a woman. Especially when you're dressed up all nice. And she tells them that she wants to talk to the general because she wants to be a double agent for him. And she's going to tell him all this stuff. Everybody's very excited about this. And he says, not only is she beautiful, she's also wise. What? That's never happened before. And so she gives him this information or whatever. And he, of course, is interested in her not just as a provider of information, but also he has darker intentions, which she pretends to go along with, but pulling the classic move, which always keeps you safe. She makes sure at the banquet that he drinks too much. So he passes out in the tent, and she's alone with him because she prearranged this whole thing, pretending she was going to be okay with everything. And instead, she prays again and grabs his massive sword and prays for strength and beheads him. She then takes his head in a bag and tells the Assyrians that she's going to go pray, which she had set up as her strategy before to walk around and pray. So she walks out with the head of a general all the way out through the war camp and escapes back to her town, where she continues to act kind of like a judge from the Tanakh by advising them on their military strategy. He mounts his head up on the wall and kicks out the Assyrians. And it says that the land lived in peace for much time because of her work. So, delightful story, as long as, you're not too bothered by beheadings. Kind of fits within the narrative of Tanakh about the underdog using their wits and perhaps gray areas in order to escape empire, or the encroaching empire anyway. And so you can imagine why it's popular in the first century, as they're once again dealing with encroaching empire.
Feels very Estery to me.
Right.
Like the whole, here's another shrewd woman, heroine of the story, outsmarts everybody, has this wisdom, saves them from imperial wrath.
Very much so.
I love it.
Yeah, like Tamar was our first archetype, but she was getting justice for herself and her dead husband, right? And then we kind of expand up into saving the whole people group. Okay, so once again, this was popular, referencing Simeon and referencing a widow who had lived a long time and yet had not remarried and thus probably had means. All these things are designed to set up our idea about Hannah and make us remember it. But in Yehudit's story, in the book of Judith, she is using her wits and ultimately her violence to keep out an encroaching empire. And so I think it's possible that the Lucan narrative wants us to notice that people who are in the way of Jesus are keeping away the encroaching empire and championing the redemption of Yisrael, as Luke puts it, via hearing from the Lord and teaching other people about it, right? Because it says that she then spoke about it. That word spoke is the same that Jesus uses when he's talking. It'll say that he was about to say a parable, and it's that word. So she's teaching everybody in the temple about this redemption. And so I think that Luke is trying to provide this woman is of the new way that we walk. We're not out there murdering generals. Instead, we're ministering to God's people, hearing glimpses of kingdom coming, and with joy rather than anger, because Yehudit does have a lot of anger, heralding his coming.
And perhaps maybe internal as well. Like I'm looking at the story, like she's not having to leave camp to go take care of business because the people of God aren't. Perhaps maybe there's an evolution as well, that the people of God are who Hannah's going to share this news.
Right.
Because perhaps there's a lot of potential in the people of God actually rising to the occasion.
Right. Right. I mean, if you're in that spot and you're a zealot, it's a great idea to try to ship an assassin over to, kill Caesar.
Yep.
And instead, we have this other model presented through Hannah. So there she is, teaching people in the temple. Doesn't say she's just in the women's courts. She's doing her thing. So that's our first observations. Women continue to prophesy throughout the New Testament, it seems, just as they did in the Old Testament. Questions, comments, concerns?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. I want to talk about some Greek, which is not my usual realm. So bear with me if I do mispronounce something, internet. I know the internet is famously graceful with people who, say things wrong. So I rest easily.
Well, it can't be any worse than what we've done before on this podcast. So
there we go. You did have a charming pronunciation of Hannah's dad's name. So
Thank you.
yeah, that's what I'm here for. Just building you up day by
I'll
day.
take that compliment.
First Thessalonians, encourage one another, as even you are also already doing. All right. So different words for service in the Greek. We've got 6 that we're going to survey today. We're going to skim over them, not deep dives, but they are important for contextualizing these other women that we're going to meet. So we've got oiketes. It's a household domestic servant. This is like Downton Abbey. This is the word used when it says no servant can serve 2 masters. In Matthew 6, it's our word for a household domestic servant. This makes sense because if you're in somebody's house, you can't very easily go and serve another master, right? Makes sense that he would choose that word. Domestic servant. So that's the first one. And it's not the one we're going to look at. Of course, again, standard teaching, it's going to be the last one. So pais, fascinating conversations around pais, but it's another one that gets translated servant. But it is special in that it connotes youth. In the Hebrew, I won't test you, it's a na'ar. And in Matthew 2, Herod slays all of the pais. The boy who keeps falling in the fire is a pais that Jesus exercises. Is that right? It sounds like he did Pilates with him.
Just for the record, I would have passed that test. I'm also getting strong John Hatter vibes. A shout out to John Hatter. He did a whole dissertation on these words for servant, particularly in the Gospel of Matthew, I believe, and had a wonderful conversation around his dinner table. So
very fun.
It would have helped me pass some of this test.
Okay.
I like it.
Our third word is therapon. We know it's like a retainer. Homer uses it that way. In Hebrews 3, Moshe is called a therapon, which I think is kind of fun because it's like God kept him on retainer. Like, yeah, you can serve pero for a while, but I'm going to snatch you up. You're on retainer for me. We've got this is the one that, to me, it should be pronounced hyperetes. So if you're doing your own Strong's work, you can try to use that pronunciation. But apparently it's huperetes. Alas, Greek, not my strength. But this one is an under rower. So in Greek triremes, you've got 3 layers of people rowing. And Paul, when he's writing to the Corinthians, which Corinth was an early adopter of triremes, they introduced them to the rest of Greece. So text to context, as someone I know likes to say. He refers to himself as this under rower for Christ, a steward of the mysteries of God. Then we've got the most common word. Number 5 is doulos. This is our slave, our bondservant. It's the most common 126 times. So if you're wondering about a verse, it's probably doulos. It's all through the parables whenever we're talking about servants making a dinner or whatever. It's a doulos. So these are all the words that one might think of when we talk about servant. But the last one, which we are going to dig into a little bit through one of our female characters, is diakonos. So diakonos is related to the Hebrew sharet, and it's the word that we get minister from. Sharet is a waiter, technically. It's Yosef at Potiphar's house. It's referred it's the verb for what priests do in Exodus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, not in Leviticus. But so it's the work of the priest. It's not just general work. It's I do whatever you need. I run God's house. I'm his priest. I serve at his pleasure and serve all those coming into his household to meet him, right? We're kind of waiting on God like a good valet. Again, I haven't watched that much Downton Abbey, but I'm feeling a lot of Downton Abbey energy here.
And it does feel like a reserved role. Like it's like a lot of these other roles are like, lots of people in culture would have been these things, and yet this role feels to me like it's, like you said, priests. Like this is a role that's chosen. It's something special.
It has heft, for sure. And Paul uses it that way. He uses it 4 times in 2 Corinthians to talk about his ministry. He uses it in 1 Corinthians 3 to talk about Apollos and Paul are both sharathim, are both ministers. In Ephesians 3, he says, of this gospel, I was made a diakonos. I was made a minister. In Ephesians and Colossians, it's used when talking about Tychicus. And in Colossians, it's used to talk about Epaphras. So she shows up, ding, ding, ding. Our woman that we're endeavoring not to forget is Phoebe. And she shows up in Romans 16, verse 1. We've all seen Magic School Bus. We all know Phoebe is female name. And usually she's translated servant. I use that usually because when I look on Bible Hub and it gives you 32 translation options right next to each other, 22 of those 32 use the word servant, which within the context of all these servant words, sure. But when we put it next to Corinthians and Apollos and Paul and the gospel, it has this minister heft, like we were just saying. It's the same for Epaphras. He's the one who founded the Colossian church, right? He's the one who converted everybody and started the church there that Paul came to. And then some of the translations go with deaconess to try to get that it's this extra title, right? Deacon comes from diakon. So fair shot, except for I would argue that that's a little bit anachronistic, a little bit of an interpolation, because Romans is one of our earliest scrolls from 55 or 57, depending on who you listen to, but we're pretty sure that it's very early. And we know that our hierarchy of church leadership comes from later in the story. The Didache being one of our first things, talking about the ways that church administration happens. It doesn't mention deacons at all, right? Verse 2 also of Romans 16 implies that she's the one carrying the letter, which also, if we make the same conclusions that we do about these different other male characters who carry the letters, implies potentially a position of leadership. So Phoebe, it's easy to read over her, blah, 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 a whole bunch of names at the end of Romans, just as a servant. But if we know these different contextual layers to these different words for servant, she's not just an XYZ, not just someone on the fringes that Paul wanted to say an extra thanks to, but someone potentially significant in her community.
Well, and we don't read over a lot of the other names in the same way. We don't read over, true, we don't talk about Epaphras every time we are turning the page, but we don't tend to we make a bigger deal about Epaphras than we do like Phoebe,
right?
Like typically in our conversations, or the ministry of Paul. It's a pretty big deal,
right?
These other places where the word gets used. So yeah, absolutely. It's a great point.
You know how the NIV translates this?
Do tell.
Deacon.
All right. Well, why don't you read verses 1 and 2, actually, for the full context for people who don't have their Bibles right in front of them, which I presume is most people.
It does slap 2 footnotes on it, so...
That's how you know you're getting saucy.
It gives servant as an alternative, and then it does an explanation. The word deacon refers here to a Christian designated to serve with the overseers / elders of the church in a variety of ways. And then it points you to Philippians and 1 Timothy for examples.
Fascinating.
Other examples. So, by the way, all these words, we don't have a fancy graphic for learning Greek with Elle, but I feel like we should make a presentation for
that
these
should be
words.
Alongside Elle for sure.
Yeah.
From Elle.
We won't title it in any fancy way. We'll just present the words and
Great.
let them sit on their own. But we'll make a presentation for this. Okay, Romans 16. I commend to you our sister Phoebe, a deacon of the church in Cenchreae.
Confidence is everything, Brent. Confidence is everything.
I ask you to receive her in the Lord in a way worthy of his people, and to give her any help she may need from you, for she has been the benefactor of many people, including me.
Amazing.
And is that word benefactor, by the way, because I feel like this makes us even... Is that the same word they'd use for a patron in a system of patronage?
Yes, it is.
Which I feel like makes that point even more poignant to me. Like,
Right.
because she's the benefactor, as in she's been the one to patron Paul.
Right.
Is how I'm hearing that.
Right.
Whew!
Which,
Yeah.
from our modern eyes, going to be easy to imagine a patron as just someone who's donated to your GoFundMe, right? Like, oh, thanks. Like, shout out to the patrons. However, it's much more, as we previously discussed, much more like the Medici family patronizing a musician to write a mass.
Yep.
It has a more of a hierarchical implication.
Somebody is pulling you up through life. It can be in a really negative sense in a Greco-Roman world, but it's somebody that is helping you get where you are trying to go.
Right.
Is the language distinctive from the women who supported Jesus' ministry that we see in the Gospels?
It's the same cultural context. And so Jesus does a little bit of maneuvering to remind us that God is his chief patron, because there is a distinct hierarchy of the way you are supposed to respond to a patron. If you're a client, is you show up and you tell them, hi, I'm here. What do you want me to do today? And that person says, oh, I need this from you. And then they give you the resources to do it and you go and do it. And so Jesus does allow women to be his patrons, which is fascinating in and of itself, while also reminding us that the person whose mission he is really running is still God the Father's.
Sure.
Okay.
Good question, Brent. I like that.
So the same thing happens to Miriam, in Romans 16:6. She's described as a hard worker, which again, if you don't know, it's like, oh yeah, she's always there at 6 a.m. or setting up the chairs for church. We appreciate Mary. Thank goodness for Mary. What a cherished person she is. But again, it's the same word described for Epaphras, who preaches the gospel. Again, it's one of the words Paul uses to describe himself in Galatians 4 when he says, I am laboring over you in vain. So not to diminish the person who sets up chairs before church. We're so thankful that happens. But ascribing a certain role segregation to Mary and imagining what kind of work she's doing only being that of setting up chairs before church is a boundary line which is not there in the Greek. It's not necessarily a faithful biblical interpretation to prescribe that line.
And you're already being kind with setting up chairs, because I know that the implication I was always, I'm sure, unintentionally given is that she's doing the dishes after the potluck. Like,
yeah,
forget chair setting up. It's even, the assumptions are even more drastic than that. And I think a lot of our experience.
Yep.
Absolutely nothing in this verse for the NET. Because of how many footnotes the NET has, it's interesting when it has nothing to say. But I'm looking at the format of these different translations, the NIV, the NET, and the New King James. And they're all different. So the NIV breaks every person or group into its own paragraph. The NET has this entire list of names in a single paragraph just shoved together. And the New King James is kind of like we'll just throw a paragraph break in there every once in a while to keep it interesting.
For your eyes.
Yeah, but I wonder if even the decision on, because there's no paragraph breaks in the Greek manuscripts, so right. I wonder how much the decision to break these up even has its own underlying unconscious bias.
Yeah,
going on with I don't know if the NIV translators are saying this, but are they saying hey, we need to recognize individually all of these people or these groups who have done things, whereas the NET is it's just a big list of names. Can we just get through it? And I don't know if that's what they're actually saying, but are they communicating that? I don't know.
I would have to get out my Greek New Testament, because there are paragraph breaks in the Greek. It's a great question. I'd have to look at where those show up, and those paragraph breaks may not show up until certain manuscripts, but there are paragraph breaks in the Greek New Testament. So
Bum, bum,
Yeah,
bum.
I guess there would be lines and stuff, but yeah, I was thinking of punctuation.
yeah. Oh, sure. Yep.
Okay, our last set of ladies here. So those are women who've kind of been skimmed over, right? Mary, Phoebe, Tryphenia, and Tryphosa are also called workers in the Lord. Tabitha is described as a materia, a disciple, and sometimes that's, kind of translated away. But this last group of women have been made to not exist in some of our translations. So Romans 16:7, again, we're kind of camping out here as our really battle-strewn piece of parchment. So could you, Brent, perhaps read for us Romans 16:7 in the NRSV and then the KJV
Oh my gosh.
and then the ESV? I'll do one of them for you so you don't have to Google all of them at the same time.
No, okay, hold on.
Make her read the ESV. She's making me have that for my interlinear, so make her read it.
So NRSV, KJV, and ESV. Okay, so NRSV, greet Andronicus and Junia, my fellow Israelites, who were in prison with me. They are prominent among the apostles, and they were in Christ before I was. Okay. King James, salute Andronicus and Junia, my kinsmen and my fellow prisoners, who are of note among the apostles, who also were in Christ before me. Okay. And ESV, greet Andronicus and Junia, my kinsmen and my fellow prisoners. They are well known to the apostles, and they were in Christ before me.
Okay, so we've got some differences, right? We have Junia, who in all three of these examples is all femininely marked. And then we also have well known to the apostles versus prominent among the apostles. So before we dive into this issue, just a little bit of context. I grew up having read the preface in my Bible to think that translations are always just doing the best that they can with a very difficult task, which is still true, and that they're just guided by different values around if it's word for word or if it's phrase for phrase, etc. That is still true, but also Bible translations have always been in conversation with one another. This is not a new thing that manuscripts or new translations are drafted because of a different take. Famously, the Geneva Bible, which would have been, Calvin's crew, was disseminating around Europe, and it has footnotes like we love. And one of the footnotes that they had put on Romans 13, which talks about obeying authorities, they had put a footnote that said, unless the king is corrupt. Also represents Swiss theology has always been a little more independent than some of our other European theologies. And so the King of England said, no, thank you. Absolutely not. I don't want a little addendum on this portion that says everybody should listen to me. I'm the, sword of God on the earth. Take it out. So he commissioned the KJV partially because he didn't want notes, and he thought that it should be uncorrupted by the hands of man, and he wanted one that would come out as more favorable for him. That's his bias, and it created this great Bible that we've used for a very long time. So just because something is drafted in response to something doesn't make it bad or wrong. But we do still want to acknowledge that there's a lot more going on politically than just everybody doing the best that they can.
Indeed. And I feel like I should clarify. So this is the new, revised, standard version, updated edition.
Yeah.
I feel like they've tacked on a lot of things to this. But yeah, it is the NRSV updated edition.
Right.
So in case anyone is using that translation, following along, if there were any differences, that's because what the internet has given me is the updated edition. So
right. That's important because the RSV is going to have Junia down as Junius. Same for a couple different Bibles, still holding strong to Junius. If you look, the NASB has Junius in 1977 and 1995, and then only their 2020 version, which is the NASB regular, is going to switch it to Junia, along with making a different amendation. So what's going on? Junia is a female name. Junius is not a name. Like, period. When we look at our inscriptions, people have done the work because this is a hotly contested verse, and they have counted up how many inscriptions there are of the name Junia. It was a popular common name. Junius was not. I think we have one that qualified as a maybe. So this would be like us taking the name Sarah and slapping an N on it and being like, Saran. It's a guy's name. That's not a name. That's just us trying to fix things around. The first time it shows up as Junius, which again is male rather than female, is the 9th century. Not a great time for women. And we have all of our early church fathers affirming Junia, both in her femininity and her apostleship. We have people like John Christensen. We have one of the other Johns, Basilides, across the spectrum. So from the Gnostic side to the straight up side, everybody's excited about Junia the apostle. However, again, 9th century, we first start to see these manuscripts, which make a change. To do the most generous construction, it would be, like Brent said earlier, an unconscious bias that says, well, that has to be an error. So I'll just make a little adjustment here. And they carried on their merry way, right? Of just them bringing their own ideas into the text and not realizing it. It's also possible to imagine that wasn't what was happening, especially in the 9th century. But it's still, because of the faithfulness of the KJV, translating her as Junia, we still had a wealth of Bible translations keeping her to be feminine until we got to the 20s, which the 20s in America was a tumultuous time. There were lots of women who were in leadership, whether under the auspices of a formalized institution that said that was okay, or they were just running around the countryside causing havoc. And so that's an exaggeration. But it was also a time when they were thinking about these issues. And so at that time, you start seeing different versions again popping up, changing it to Junius. Again, that is the result of cultural bias being put onto the Bible. Not making it feminine is not us interpolating a modern value of women into the text. It's the opposite. So the NASB really also guides us along here in that before the 2000s, before we started having some concerns in our American Christianity about this verse, it had been translated outstanding among the apostles continually. That's why I had you read, multiple there. Even the RSV, which did make it Junius, still had it well known or outstanding. So if we follow the NASB here, as we follow our cultural timeline in the church, the NASB in 1977 says Junius, outstanding among the apostles. In 1995, it kept Junius, outstanding among the apostles. And then in 2020, maybe reflecting the fact that more people in the zeitgeist have been recognizing that it's Junia. They switched it to Junia, but then they also switched it away from their consistent translation of outstanding among the apostles to be outstanding in the view of the apostles. Which obviously
sneaky
removes her apostleship. So that was a invention of the ESV writers. They were the ones who came up with that idea. you can read online in Wikipedia the reasons that they made that choice, and you can read the criticisms of that choice, which is that they're on extraordinarily shaky ground in terms of being consistent throughout the text and the way that we translate that grammatical phrase. But it fit for them, so we got her femininity restored and her apostleship taken away. So again, you can see this if you type in Romans 16:7 Bible Hub. You can see 32 different people who, yes, were doing their best, yes, are also shaped by their era, and see if your favorite version where they're landing on this particular issue.
NIV gets it once again. Junia, outstanding among the apostles.
Right.
Boom.
Right, because there's folks who do say Junia.
Officially unofficial translation of the Bama podcast.
I was trying to figure out how I wanted to say that. Brent nailed it.
Oh, dear. Yeah, because some people picked up the Junia, but then took the ESV new option that had been given to them and said, okay, she can be feminine, but we're going to change this wording.
See, people ask us about this all the time, like why we like to use NIV. They've read all the Facebook memes, obviously NIV straight from the pit of hell, and why would we use it? And when I say, because I prefer the scholarship and the parameters of the translation, and that's not always true, and I'm sure Elle probably has some bones to pick with the NIV if I were to really press her on it. But I think these are good examples of what I mean when I say that. So,
well, even as we were going through the podcast, because you grew up on the NIV 84, and then I would load up my electronic Bible and read the new NIV, and you're like, oh, that ruins my teaching point because they actually got it right now.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. That's why.
If you're looking,
all right, back to you, Elle. Sorry.
We're fine. A non-political, hopefully, if you're annoyed by all of this and you went like, well, what's a more ecumenical, people who've come together, right? Because NASB is funded by the SBC. Yep. So NRSV was written by the National Council of Churches, which is ecumenical from a whole bunch of mainline and evangelical and even Catholic insights. It comes from 1908. They have a pretty cool history. They were, if you think they're too progressive, do not be afraid. They took money from the CIA to oppose communism at one point. So, they're not...
Not the tidbit I thought would show up in the Bay Mob podcast, but I'm here for it.
Right? What's the CIA up to these days? We'll see. Right. So most famously, this has happened to Junia, but it's also happened to other characters. Julia, who's also in Romans 16.
I was just looking at that one the whole time you guys were chatting. I was like, oh, check this out. Yep.
Syntyche, which, boy, that's a guess at how her name is pronounced, but she also got switched to masculine and then back to feminine when people realized what was at work. And usually that happens partially because people are uncomfortable with two women in the missionary pair system that we're used to in the text. And so that's why Tryphenia and Tryphosa get downgraded from ministers, because you can't have two in a pair. So anyway, all the things, these are forgotten women. Maybe they've been deleted entirely. Maybe they've just been skimmed over so that we can assign our own assumptions. And maybe they could just use a little bit more time and inspection, like Hannah. That's what I've got.
That's it for this episode?
Yeah. What are we running at, Brent?
Holy smokes.
50 minutes, maybe. Beautifully succinct.
Yeah. Perfect.
Wow. And I was tracking the whole time. I didn't even get lost.
Amazing.
Sometimes I will get my brain spinning and I don't even know where I'm at for a while. I black out for a little bit and I come back when she asks me a question.
Sounds like plausible deniability to me.
But not on this episode. I was tracking the whole time. No, I think those it is, it's crazy to become aware of some of these things and see that and be able to look at what's been done right before our eyes on some of these instances. Some of them are a little bit more complex and nuanced. Some of them are just like, they did what?
Right.
They added an S? What? How could they do that?
And there are pretty extensive footnotes on some of these things in the NET, which will kind of give you an idea of some of the debate and the different manuscripts at play and the different, how Greek is constructed and whatever. And it's, you could see how it'd be pretty easy to just, if you're a scribe and you're like, I don't like that, and you just throw a little accent mark on there, and all of a sudden it's a totally different thing, and then you've got it's like this huge battle
Well,
of like.
Should just do your own Googling. Not that Googling is always the answer. In fact, it can be a dangerous answer. But sometimes those footnotes, they look like they're doing their jobs because it'll say some manuscripts say XYZ in a footnote. But then when you actually look at it, which takes some work, they're all like post 12th century.
Right,
it's
right.
like, well, that's not.
Right. Yeah. It's not just how many manuscripts, it's what manuscripts we're talking about, what period, what era, what influence, all those kinds of things. Absolutely.
Where, like, sometimes it's all the Armenian ones. It's like, well,
Yep.
okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
That tells me something about Armenia that is helpful and interesting about the church.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen some footnotes that go into great detail about which manuscripts, but they don't necessarily explain when or where those manuscripts are from. So yeah, there's like, there's no simple answer. You gotta actually do some work to nail it down. But I feel like in cases like this, where it's like kind of like this, I mean, I don't know if obscure, but it's not like people don't quote Romans 16 very often. We're not super familiar with it. We just read it. It's like, oh, it's a bunch of names, and we don't really sit down and consider it in depth. And I feel like a translation tool where you're looking at a bunch of translations can really dig up. I mean, as we've illustrated here, a whole bunch of like variations. It's like, wow, how are these all so different? Like,
Right.
is it, so plenty of things to consider in our survey
Brent,
of the women of the New Testament.
It's simple. If the Bible says it, gotta believe it. That's all you need to know.
That settles it. Works for me. Yep.
Oh, man. Yeah. I don't know.
Well, and I'm encouraged by this conversation for like a few reasons. I mean, some of these things, like we're titling some of these conversations of forgotten women, and some of these really truly are like, it's just easy to take hard worker, and because of our own present cultural baggage, we perceive it through a particular lens, and they do really get forgotten. And then some of these things, it's like, they weren't forgotten. They were like expunged, like they were scrubbed. And I like also what we've done here, because that's a very objective conversation, because sometimes we react by saying, oh, now there's conspiracy theories everywhere we look. Nothing's true about the scriptures. And what I like is that, and it's not that this is the only isolated case ever in the Bible of anything being toyed with, but those are very objective conversations. I appreciated when you started earlier. You were like, I think you were talking about Judith, and you were talking about, this is not some large conspiracy theory to remove it because of the feminine character, but because of so many other things at play. There's objectivity, not open shut, like no conversation, but there is objectivity to those conversations.
Right. How different communities want to wrap in this kind of information with their broader understanding of roles and Pauline instructions is totally up to them and their communities.
Right. Yeah. Great point. 100%.
Yeah.
Beautiful to know.
And just to consider, like Romans 16, like you could sit in this chapter for a long time and really, really think about like the breadth of Paul's ministry to Rome, the number of people involved, the diversity of backgrounds and situations. Like we have benefactors, and then we have, we have people whose fidelity to Christ has stood the test. It's like, okay, well, that guy's probably a girl. I don't know. Apelles, is that a guy or a girl? I don't know.
Apollos, probably a dude.
Oh no, it's not Apollos. It's Apelles is how they're transliterating it. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Like you can look into that and figure out if that's a guy or girl. But either way, their fidelity to Christ has stood the test. It's like, well, we don't know what that means exactly, but that person has probably been through some stuff. And like just the number of people in this chapter is really something to like step back and not just read over, but actually consider like what their story is and what we can learn about them. So
my Reformed Baptist church that I grew up in spent no fewer than 15 years in the book of Romans. And so I feel okay not spending more time.
But how much time did you spend in this chapter?
Not as much as the other ones, that's for sure.
Maybe a lot. Maybe too much time explaining away all of the...
More than most, but not as much.
You know, when you're a church who has 3 services and all of the congregants are commanded to attend all 3 services, you can spend a lot more time.
That's right.
In certain spots.
Oof.
So let's go back to that model, man. Some potluck, some chaos, kids napping in the back.
I mean, I think we could all use a nap. All
true.
right. Well, let's close this down before we break any records here. Let's see.
Amen.
So that does it for this week. We have one more week with Elle, talking about some more forgotten women.
Before I'm set off the gangplank, it sounds a little bit dire.
That's right. One more, and then we'll see what happens after this anthology.
Very Princess Bride, most likely kill you in the morning.
Well, we'll see. You know, people are always asking for more Hebrew lessons, so we might have to come back with some more.
Don't say that.
We'll just scrub her name from the Bema record like we did Junia from the Book of Romans.
Oh, wonderful. I'll have good company out there in the hinterlands.
I don't even mean your like Hebrew classes. I just mean like the Learning Hebrew with Elle episodes where we talk about a series of words.
Gotcha. Okay, you're finishing the episode, Brent. I believe in you. I don't want to be longest anymore.
No, I'm going to have to cut this whole thing out because this is all like a mess. And
Great. I'm glad to hear it.
Okay. Well, you know what? Just go to bambodeceptive.com. Definitely check out, I think, we're still in the middle of Marty's book tour. So like go to the news page and see where Marty's going to be. Make sure you are tracking him down and getting your book signed or whatever you want. And plenty of things to do there. We've got some things in the show notes. Yeah, that'll do it for this week. We'll talk to you again soon. Feel free to put a question in my mouth. Maggie called me 3 times. And apparently they were all pocket dials. So I've been very distracted for the last 10 minutes trying to figure out what in the world is going on.
You know, we were talking...
It looks like she's at Walmart. How could anything go wrong at Walmart?
I can think of a few.
I mean, yeah. No, yeah. So anyway, I've basically been tuned out.
You know, we were just talking about Apocrypha. You don't need... It's not authoritative. You know?
It's not even scripture, Brent. We're fine.
It's not scripture. You're fine.
It's the NKJV. It's the Apocrypha.
We're off the
rails.
rails.
Not even dealing with God's words yet.
Troubling.